The day I saw that second pink line, something shifted inside me. Not just physically, emotionally, spiritually. It felt like everything I'd ever hoped for had finally arrived. I remember sitting on the bathroom floor, holding that tiny stick, my hands shaking, tears already falling. I wasn't scared. I was ready. I'd dreamed of this, whispered it into pillows, wished it during birthdays, prayed for it when no one was listening, and now it was real. I was going to be a mother. I wanted to make the gender reveal special, not just a party, but a moment, a way to say thank you, to life, to Ethan, to everyone who had stood beside me during the rough patches. I pictured the backyard dressed in soft blues and pinks, fairy lights twinkling, our friends and family gathered with anticipation in their eyes. I even wrote little cards for each guest, thanking them for being part of our story. I imagined Ethan standing next to me, his arm around my waist, both of us crying when the confetti burst into color. It was all supposed to be about joy, about love. But in the weeks leading up to it, something felt off. Ethan was distracted, quiet in ways that didn't feel like stress. He started staying late at work. His phone barely left his hand, and when I asked if everything was okay, he'd just kiss my forehead and say, "I'm just tired." I wanted to believe that. I really did. So I told myself it was nothing, just nerves, just work, just life. Because when you're building a dream, you don't want to see the cracks. You just keep painting over them, hoping it holds. I started waking up before him, just to catch those few quiet moments alone. I'd sit by the window with my hands cradling my belly, whispering, "You're already so loved." It became my little ritual, a way to stay grounded when things around me started to feel shaky. Ethan would come downstairs eventually, kiss the top of my head, and ask if I wanted pancakes. I always said yes, even when I wasn't hungry. I held on to those small, familiar gestures like lifelines, because deep down, I think I knew they were slipping through my fingers. There were signs, of course. Missed calls he wouldn't explain. A perfume that wasn't mine clinging faintly to his shirt. Conversations that ended when I walked into the room. But I didn't want to be that woman. The one who accuses, the one who snoops, the one who turns something beautiful into something bitter. So I told myself stories. That I was overthinking. That hormones were clouding my judgment. That Ethan loved me, and this baby, too much to ever betray us. And in those moments of doubt, I'd rub my belly and think, this is what matters. Just this. People say pregnancy makes you more emotional. Maybe that's true. But for me, it made everything more visible. I noticed things I used to overlook. The way he stopped making eye contact. The way his smile no longer reached his eyes. And still, I kept planning the party. I kept choosing the cupcakes, folding napkins, smiling for photos. Because I didn't want to believe something was wrong. Because I was so focused on the joy I was supposed to feel, I almost missed the sorrow creeping in through the cracks. I remember the night we finalized the guest list. Ethan barely looked up from his phone. I was sitting on the couch, baby name book in my lap, asking, "Do you still like Ava? Or maybe Elias if it's a boy?" He just muttered something, a yes, I think, and kept scrolling. That should have stung more than it did. But by then, I was already building a wall around my heart. Quietly, brick by brick, just in case. I told myself it was temporary, that he was just tired, that the stress would pass. But there was a heaviness in the air I couldn't shake. I wanted to scream sometimes, ask him why he felt so far away, ask what had changed. But I didn't. I bit my tongue, and I smiled. Because what do you do when you're carrying someone's child and the person who gave it to you starts disappearing? You keep going, you hold your breath, and you plan the party. You wrap the gifts, smile for the camera, and pray that whatever's breaking doesn't break you. I kept telling myself, maybe I'm just imagining things. Maybe this is just a rough patch. I believed that right up until the day I got the message. The moment everything I'd been trying not to see came crashing through the front door of my heart. And from that second on, nothing, not the balloons, not the cupcakes, not even the color of the confetti, would matter the way it once did. It was a Tuesday. I remember that because I had just finished folding the last tiny onesie from the baby shower haul and sat down with a glass of water. My phone buzzed. A message from Claire, my closest friend since high school. The preview showed a photo followed by the words, "I'm so sorry, but you need to see this." My stomach dropped before I even opened it. My fingers hovered over the screen, cold. When I finally tapped in, the world around me blurred. It wasn't just a photo, it was a punch to the chest. There he was, Ethan, laughing, leaning in too close to a woman who clearly wasn't me, her hand on his cheek, his lips on hers. There were more. A series of pictures, different outfits, different days, not a one-time mistake, a pattern, a secret life running parallel to mine. I froze. My breath caught in my throat, like my lungs forgot how to work. I stared at the screen, waiting for it to change, waiting for it to not be what it was. But it didn't change. It was real. And it broke something in me that I hadn't even realized was still whole. I didn't cry. Not at first. I just sat there, completely still, as if moving would make it worse. The silence in the house felt too loud, like it was mocking me. There I was, carrying his child, building his life, planning our future, while he was out pretending I didn't exist. I kept replaying our recent conversations in my head, the missed calls, the distant looks, the fake smiles, and I realized I hadn't been crazy. I'd been right all along. And now that I had proof, I wasn't going to confront him. Not yet. I was going to do something better. At first, all I could feel was heat. Not anger, but something deeper. Betrayal doesn't scream. It simmers. It spreads through your body like poison, slow and sharp. I looked around the living room and everything suddenly felt unfamiliar. The throw blanket he bought me for Christmas, the framed ultrasound he insisted on hanging near the fireplace, even the baby shoes sitting on the coffee table, the ones we'd picked out together. All of it felt contaminated. Like his lies had soaked into the walls. I wanted to scream, to throw something, but I didn't. I couldn't. Because something stronger was rising in me. That something was clarity, and a kind of terrifying calm. I realized right then, this wasn't going to end with a tearful confrontation or some begging apology. I wasn't going to be the woman who yelled or cried or asked, "Why her?" No, I deserved better than that. My baby deserved better than that. So instead of reacting, I opened a new folder on my phone and named it Insurance. I saved every photo Claire had sent me. I started scrolling back through old texts and calendar dates. I checked locations, receipts, his tagged posts. I began building the truth, piece by piece. I didn't tell Claire what I was planning. I just thanked her. She offered to come over, but I told her I needed space, which wasn't a lie. I needed space to think, to breathe, to transform. Because this wasn't just a betrayal. It was a turning point. I knew there would be no going back after this. The old me, the one who made excuses, who stayed quiet to keep the peace, she was already slipping away. In her place, someone new was forming. Someone who wasn't going to be blindsided ever again. That night, I lay in bed next to him, the man who had just shattered everything we were supposed to be. He slept soundly, peacefully. His arm draped over me like we were still some kind of united front. I stared at the ceiling, heart pounding, trying to memorize the exact weight of that betrayal, not just for me, but for the child I was carrying. He had no idea that the woman lying next to him had already changed. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to outsmart him. The next morning, I smiled over breakfast. I asked about his meetings, his weekend plans, even offered to help pick out a shirt for the party. He looked at me like I was still clueless. And maybe that's what hurt the most. Not just the cheating, but the ease with which he lied. Like I didn't matter. Like I wasn't the one carrying his legacy. But that's the thing about underestimating someone. It blinds you. He thought he was ahead. He thought he had time. And that was going to be his biggest mistake. Because while he played house, I played detective. I kept every receipt. I took screenshots. I backed up messages to the cloud. I even printed copies, just in case. I knew I couldn't undo the pain, but I could control the reveal. If he wanted to live a double life, fine. But I was going to make sure everyone saw both sides of it. And when the time came, when everyone we loved was standing there expecting a sweet little secret wrapped in pink or blue, I'd be the one holding the truth. In the days leading up to the party, everything looked normal. Too normal. Ethan was suddenly attentive again, asking if I needed help with the decorations, offering to handle the guest list, even suggesting we make a little speech together. I watched him move through the house like a man who had nothing to hide, like a man still playing the role of devoted husband and soon-to-be father. And I let him. I nodded, smiled, kissed his cheek. I let him believe I was still in the dark. That was the part he never saw coming. Family and friends buzzed with excitement. My mom called twice a day asking if I needed extra chairs. Ethan's sister sent Pinterest links for cupcake ideas. It was supposed to be the happiest moment of our lives, and I made sure no one suspected otherwise. I smiled for every photo. I approved every RSVP. I answered every "Are you excited?" with a glowing yes. And all the while, I was preparing something far more important than balloons or banners. I was preparing the truth. Wrapped not in pink or blue, but in proof. I knew I had to time it perfectly. The reveal couldn't feel like revenge. It had to feel like justice, like clarity, like the moment when everyone sees the full picture and finally understands what had really been happening behind the scenes. So, I made a slideshow. Innocent at first. Baby pictures of us, clips from our wedding, snippets of the nursery we painted together. But then it shifted. Smoothly, deliberately. Screenshots, photos, dates, captions. It told a story, his story. And when it ended, no one would look at him the same way again. The night before the party, I stood alone in the nursery, lights dim, hands resting on my belly. I looked around at the tiny clothes folded neatly on the shelves, the crib Ethan had half-heartedly assembled, the name decals we hadn't chosen yet. It should have been a sacred space, a room full of beginnings, but all I felt was stillness. The kind that settles just before a storm hits. My baby kicked gently, as if sensing the weight of it all. I whispered, "It's almost over, little one. We're almost free." I double-checked the slideshow on my laptop, my fingers trembling only slightly. Every image, every message was in place. I even timed it to music, soft piano, the kind you'd hear in a touching tribute. I wasn't just revealing a betrayal, I was telling a story. One I had lived through silently, breath by breath, while the man I trusted rewrote our future without me. This was my way of taking that narrative back, not with yelling, not with tears, but with the truth, unfiltered, undeniable, unignorable. That night, Ethan curled up beside me, talking about the party like nothing had changed. He said he was excited, said he couldn't wait to pop the balloon and find out if he was getting a son or a daughter. I looked at him and smiled, and for the first time in weeks, it was genuine. Not because I believed in him, but because I believed in myself, in what I was about to do. He kissed my forehead and fell asleep easily. I stayed awake, watching the clock, counting the hours, not to the gender reveal, but to the reckoning. The morning of the party arrived like any other, sun filtering through the curtains, the smell of fresh coffee filling the kitchen. Ethan was all charm and smiles, wearing the blue button-down I'd set aside for him weeks ago. He kissed me on the cheek and called me his beautiful mama. I just smiled and handed him a list of things to double-check. It was almost comical, watching him move through the motions. Helping set up chairs, greeting guests, playing the doting husband. He had no idea he was walking into the final act of his own carefully constructed lie. The backyard looked magical. String lights, pastel streamers, tables topped with cupcakes and confetti poppers. Everything exactly as I had envisioned. Friends and family arrived in waves, arms full of gifts, hearts full of excitement. Cameras were already out, ready to capture what they all thought would be a picture-perfect moment. And I gave it to them. I laughed, I posed, I hugged everyone like I didn't have the weight of betrayal sitting squarely on my chest. I was calm, polished, unshakable, because I knew what was coming, and it wasn't confetti. Just before the balloon was set to be popped, I tapped the microphone. The guests quieted, faces beaming with anticipation. Ethan stood beside me, his arm casually draped around my back, and I looked out at that sea of people who thought they were about to witness a sweet surprise. I cleared my throat, smiled gently, and said, "Before we find out if we're having a boy or a girl, there's something I'd like to share with all of you first." There was a pause, just a breath, after I spoke, where no one quite knew what to expect. A few guests laughed nervously, probably thinking I was about to show a childhood montage or announce twins. Ethan leaned in, grinning like he was in on the joke. "What are you doing?" he whispered. I didn't answer. I just turned to the screen and pressed play. The soft piano music began, and the first image appeared, our wedding photo. People smiled, some clapped quietly. Then the next slide came up, and the mood shifted. It was a photo of Ethan, seated at a restaurant, his hand intertwined with another woman's. At first, the room didn't register it. Confusion rippled across a few faces. Then came the second image, and the third, and the fourth. Her lips on his cheek, his arm around her waist. The dates and times stamped on each photo, clear as day and far too recent to explain away. There were no more smiles, no more clapping, just stunned silence and a few gasps. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The slideshow was doing all the talking. Ethan's smile vanished. He stepped forward and reached for the laptop, but I held up my hand, steady, deliberate. "Not yet," I said softly, loud enough for the mic to carry. His face flushed. The guests were frozen. I could see my mother's eyes wide with horror, my best friend's hand covering her mouth, and Ethan's parents staring like they'd just seen a ghost. I took one step back and looked at him. Really looked. "You wanted a surprise, remember?" I said. "Well, here it is." He opened his mouth to speak, to defend himself maybe, but nothing came out. Just a stutter, a blink, a man unraveling in real time. I watched as realization crashed into him, not just that he'd been caught, but how he'd been caught. In front of everyone, his boss, his cousins, his childhood best friend, our neighbors. There was nowhere to run, no lie that could crawl out of this. The silence in the yard was deafening, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting, watching. I stood there, calm, steady, with my hand on my belly and truth on my side. "I thought long and hard about how to handle this," I said, still holding the mic. I could have yelled. I could have begged for answers, but I realized I don't need any. I already have the only answer that matters. I glanced at the screen, now frozen on a photo of them at what was clearly our favorite spot downtown. "I needed you all to see it too," I added, looking at the crowd now, not just him. Because this day was meant to be a celebration of life and love. And I won't let a lie masquerade as either. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Others still stared, stunned. I caught Claire's eye across the lawn. She gave me the smallest nod, her hand over her heart. That was all I needed. I looked back at Ethan, whose face was now pale, his mouth still slightly open like he was searching for a script that didn't exist. And then I smiled. Not a spiteful smile, not a cruel one. Just the kind of smile a woman wears when she finally sees clearly. When the weight lifts, when the truth stands taller than the shame. Someone finally broke the silence. A cough, maybe a whispered, "Oh my God." But no one moved, not even Ethan. He just stood there, stunned, stripped bare by the truth. I handed the mic to the DJ and walked toward the balloon, the one we were supposed to pop together. I placed my hand gently on it, feeling the tension in the air wrap itself around every inch of me. Then I looked back at him. "This was supposed to be about the baby," I said, my voice steady. "And in a way, it still is, because they deserve a mother who won't tolerate lies." I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder, simple, clean, tied with a blue ribbon. I walked it over to Ethan and placed it in his hands. "You don't have to open it now," I said, "but you will." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The truth had already been loud enough. That folder held divorce papers, signed, sealed, ready. The guests didn't gasp this time. They just stared, like they were watching something sacred happen. Not a scene, but a reclaiming. Not a breakdown, but a rebirth. I turned to the crowd one last time and smiled, not with sadness, but with peace. "Now you know what it's like to be surprised," I said to Ethan, loud enough for everyone to hear. Then I stepped away from the balloon. I didn't need to pop it anymore. The reveal had already happened. And this time, it wasn't about pink or blue. It was about truth and freedom, and knowing that no matter how messy it all looked from the outside, I had finally chosen me. The party didn't end so much as it dissolved. People didn't know whether to stay, to hug me, to speak, or just quietly slip out the side gate. I didn't blame them. It's not every day you witness someone's mask fall off in front of a backyard full of witnesses. I stood by the snack table for a while, accepting the few brave hands that reached out, the whispered, "You didn't deserve that," or "You were so strong." But I wasn't trying to be strong. I was just done. Done pretending, done hoping, done waiting for someone else to do the right thing. Ethan tried to follow me inside after everyone left. I locked the door. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just slid the latch and walked upstairs. I could hear him through the door, calling my name, begging for a conversation, saying it wasn't what it looked like. But we both knew better. I wasn't the same woman who cried into her pillow at night, wondering what she'd done wrong. That version of me didn't live here anymore. The one who did. She had a baby to protect, a future to rebuild, a life to reclaim. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared out the window, one hand on my belly, the other resting on the folder that started it all. Not the one filled with evidence. The other one, labeled Next Steps. Inside were checklists, doctor appointments, financial goals, a list of names I liked for the baby. It wasn't a plan B, it was a new plan A. One where I didn't have to wonder if I was enough. Where I didn't have to shrink myself to make someone else feel big. That night, for the first time in months, I slept with both eyes closed. In the days that followed, the silence was different. It wasn't the kind that comes from tension or waiting for something to explode. It was clean, restful. I'd wake up to the hum of morning birds, make myself a slow breakfast, and sit in the quiet without checking over my shoulder. I started to notice things again. The way the sun poured through the kitchen window, how the baby kicked when I played music, the small joy of warm socks fresh from the dryer. It was like I'd been underwater for months, and now I could finally breathe. Of course the calls came. From Ethan, from his sister, even from his mother. Some were laced with disbelief, others with apology. But I didn't owe them explanations. I'd already given them the truth, publicly, plainly. And when someone shows you who they are, you don't owe them another chance to rewrite the ending. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't angry. I was clear. And that clarity gave me peace. It gave me boundaries. It gave me space to finally ask, what do I want my life to look like now? And the answer was simple. Safe. Honest. Unapologetically mine. I started therapy. I walked more. I wrote letters to my baby. Letters I'd seal and save, so one day they'd know what strength looked like. Not the kind that roars, the kind that quietly refuses to settle. I wasn't trying to win anything. I wasn't out to hurt him. I just wanted freedom, and I got it. Not from a man, but from the version of myself that used to think love had to mean sacrifice. I signed the final papers on a Tuesday, poetic in a way, considering that's when it all began. I walked out of that courthouse with a quiet kind of triumph. No fanfare, no victory lap. Just me, my belly, and a future I finally felt ready to claim. It's strange how something that once felt like the end of the world can turn into the beginning of everything. I didn't walk away broken. I walked away whole. Because the truth didn't destroy me, it freed me. I started redecorating the nursery, not because it reminded me of him, but because I wanted every corner of that room to feel like a new chapter. Soft blankets, clean walls, light and warmth, and peace. I even picked a name. one that means strength, one that carries no trace of the past. And when people ask if I'm okay, I don't say I'm fine anymore. I say, I'm better. Because I am. Better than I was. Stronger than I knew. And finally, completely, mine. Ethan, he lost a wife. He lost the family he could have had. But me? I gained myself. I gained clarity, calm, courage, and in a world that wanted me to shrink, I chose to expand. I chose to grow. And I'll keep choosing that, every single day. Because the real reveal wasn't blue or pink. It was this. I was never the one who needed fixing. I was the surprise, and I finally saw it for myself.